everybody has an idea of where they want to go. Like, especially as a student, like, okay, after school, I want to do business like this. I want to get my first apartment. I want to do this.
Good evening, everyone. Can we all hear me? Good evening. Please, can someone confirm that they can hear me? Good evening.
Yes, I can
Yes,
hear
you're
you.
audible.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining in for today's session. Welcome to class. We are about to commence class. Please kindly send notifications into your subgroups, letting your the other commentees know that we are about to start class. All right. So please, can we kindly do that? Let us send reminders and notice to everyone who is not yet on the call that they should do that as soon as possible. So once again, good evening, everyone. Welcome to class. We are in week 4 of the Jiipcc Mentorship and Internship program under the Intellectual Property course. And today we'll be discussing quite a very interesting topic, which is sports business and law. Right, we have one of our mentors already on the call. Thank you so much, Mr. Polarin, for joining. We are happy to have you in this session. So we'll not be wasting any time. I think we already know the drill, right? We'll be going straight to introducing mentors. We take mentors presentation. We take mentors discourse and presentation. We take mentees presentation. We take feedback from mentors and then questions and answer. That is the way we're going to be going. And so just to quickly run through our mentors for today, first and foremost, we're expecting in today's class Mr. Sand Mbakalu. Just to quickly run through his profile quickly, Mr. Sand Mbakalu is an international development expert with over 15 years of experience in implementing projects related to geographic indications, international trade and investments, trade policy, research, policy reforms, market access, monitoring and evaluation, capacity building, marketing linkages, and value chains. He served as the lead technical consultant for the Africa Intellectual Property and Innovation AfriP project, which is funded by the European Union Intellectual Property Office. SAN plays a crucial role in assisting the Nigerian government in establishing a robust framework for the protection and promotion of geographic indications. Additionally, he is the chair of the organizing committee for the All Africa Intellectual Property Summit, and he leads several other development projects in Nigeria and across Africa. Currently, Sand is the executive director for the African International Trade and Commerce Research and is pursuing a PhD in the University of Cape Town, South Africa. So Mr. Sand will be one of our mentors in today's class. Secondly, we already have Mr. Folarin on call. Our second mentor, that is Folarinwa Aluko. Let me quickly run through his profile. Mr. Folarin Aluko is a legal practitioner and partner in the firm Truman Rockwood Solicitors, where he provides advisory and consultancy services to companies and a wide range of creators, users, and startups. Folarin is a director of the Intellectual Property Institute Nigeria. He is the chairman board of trustees of the Intellectual Property Lawyers Association Nigeria. Folarin is a member board of trustees of the Sports Lawyers Association of Nigeria, as well as a member of the board of Nigeria Digital Chambers of Commerce. Mr. Aluko is also a board member of the Songwriters Association Nigeria with a background in ICT hardware and digital forensics. Folarin has led legal teams to champion consequential strategic impact public interest litigation in the IP space since 2012. Folarin is a consulting mediator with commercial intermediates and ADR firm based in Lagos and Abuja. He's a thought leader in Nigeria innovation, technology, intellectual property, and entertainment space. Thank you so much, Mr. Folarin, for coming in on board. We are happy to have you in class. So what we'll be doing right now, not to waste time, is to hand over the session to the mentors for their discourse. We'll be starting with Mr. Folarin. Thank you so much, sir, for joining. So our topic for today, once again, is sports business and law, right? Sports business and law. So, Mr. Folarin, we just want to hear from you quickly in a few minutes. Well, let's say 30 minutes there about share your thoughts on the topic for today. You're very, very much welcome, sir.
Did you say 30 minutes thereabout?
Yes, sir.
I definitely will not spend up to a fraction of that, because I'd love to hear from I love to hear presentations and see how we can brainstorm on the various very interesting points that have been raised. But I think this session are supposed to be practical, so I'll try not to. I don't even like being academic, generally speaking. But I would say that thank you very much. It's always a pleasure joining in, and it's always a pleasure joining in. Let me see. Okay. Oops. Let me see. I'm so sorry. A call came in. So I talking about sports and IP law, sports business and law. I think it's an interesting topic. It's very wide. Was it yesterday? About 2 days ago, I attended a meeting, or I attended a cocktail, and I had the pleasure of meeting an Olympian, a Nigerian Olympian, who is very passionate about sports development in Nigeria. And he's somebody who has also raised at least one other Olympian. If you're familiar with contemporary sports, you probably know who this person is. he raised a lady who is currently an Olympian. And I recall that about 4 years ago, 3, 4 years ago, I had he and I didn't meet, but our paths crossed because at the time he was trying to raise money to fund his this young lady, his mentees, uh, to fund her trip, which which and it was a trip to the Olympics, and I think that year she won a silver. I think she won a silver, but he was trying to fund the trip, and so they were looking for corporate sponsors. And he talked to a client of mine who was in the course of who was looking at the options around raising money for that athlete. And I found it very interesting. We had a very long conversation, but we talked about it was a sports business conversation. So he told me at the time that he raised about 4 million naira, which was a lot of money at the time, but considering that this is an Olympian, that 4 million naira was a very paltry amount, if you ask me. And it also goes to show. So for me, it is demonstrative of a number of things. It demonstrates the I wouldn't call it foresight, but it demonstrates how well some businesses see or view sports in Nigeria. Even though, and this sport is not football, it's not, but it's one of the more popular sports. But for me, the important thing is, number one, I was shocked at the time when the brief came my way. I spoke to a couple of people, but for me at the time, number one, the first issue was that brands did not see this as something that they should jump on. So that is a challenge because there are business opportunities. I mean, who else is in a better position to see business opportunities than the business community? And this was a situation where the business community had an opportunity to identify with, somebody who was going somewhere, who had qualified for the Olympics. And of course, she won medals, and the rest is history. But excuse me, I would have assumed that it would be so easy for most businesses to jump on this bandwagon, not from a nationalistic point of view alone, but simply from the point of view of the fact that you're going to get easy publicity if you identify with a brand that is going to the Olympics. I mean, you wouldn't find, as opposed to sending money to somebody on Instagram, who perhaps has bought X number of followers. I'm just saying, so you'd expect that, sports should be a driver or sports should be driven by commerce. And I think I understand one of the reasons why the business community does not embrace sports the way they should. Now, the Nigeria's business community does embrace sports. But, when you see things like that or situations such as that, it leads you, want to ask some very critical questions, and we talked, and of course, he has recently been appointed to a position, so he's heading something somewhere. And we talked about business opportunities in that space. And very interestingly, he shared how he intends to engage with the business community in that particular state. And how will he do that? He's going to talk to guys. They will. The plan is to manufacture and produce everything locally. So you have a situation where, by just jumping, by putting the right set of people in one institution, again, I must apologize. I don't want to share the information from the conversation, but it just shows how easy it should be to get Nigeria's sports industry working. Because all over the world, the sports industry is a magnet for business. And that is because sports draws eyeballs and business needs eyeballs. And at the root of all of this, what we're talking about is business. So very quickly we made a connection between sports and and clothing, and then we went to merchandising, and then we went to real estate, because the plan is to set up academies across the states, which ultimately will become a model for something that can be done across the country. But it then went to real estate, and then the dream just kept getting bigger, And I said to myself, yeah, this is how organically, and the conversations is supposed to span about 4 years, 5 years. So organically, you can actually see the growth or the impact on several industries within a very short space of time. So I think, like I said, I think I understand why businesses are not attracted to the sports industry. And one of the reasons is because merit is not necessarily the primary means through which sporting decisions are made in Nigeria at the moment, which is rather unfortunate. But there's a very direct link between sports and the businesses that are between sports and business. I'm not talking about sports business alone now, but between sports and the private sector, there's a direct link because sports attracts eyeballs, and the private sector or business interests go wherever there are eyeballs. So, and of course, in the midst of what really is sports law, if you may, or sports business, except if it's not a mix of contract law, intellectual property, dispute resolution, which is bespoke, and what do you call it? And it's contract, intellectual property, dispute resolution, and maybe law of torts. So I would say that Nigeria is losing a lot, and one of the reasons why that is so is because sports by definition is competitive, and people always want to see spectators, viewers want to see the best, situations where the best emerge. And so merit really is the order of the day, because you have to ensure that people are given opportunities to, that the process is as inclusive as possible. But of course, once you bring politics into any of these spaces, politics kills everything. So I would say that under normal circumstances, you don't need to convince the business community to rally around sectors where you find assets or where there are eyeballs. The reason why there is some, and it's not a general one, but the reason why there is some apathy from the business community, I think, is centers around sports management, and so in my opinion, at least I know that you guys have prepared made presentations that center around, what the structure of sports business and how sports and what areas within the sporting industry are viable for people who want to invest money, who want to put their money, and what the subject matter areas are within the sporting industry that intersect with law and business. That's okay. That's your area of you can make presentations on those areas. But I would like to speak, or I would like to speak on, or to at least address or raise issues that border around governance, and why, in spite of the fact that there are all these opportunities that are bound and that are so obvious even to the blind, that in spite of all these opportunities, somehow businesses are not jumping on these opportunities, and that should provide we should be asking why. Why is it that in, the not natural order of things does not work or is not working at the moment? And we need to ask those questions because I think that professionals must ask these hard questions. So you can't call yourself an IP lawyer, for example, or you shouldn't call yourself an IP lawyer if there are problems in the IP, let's say with a regulator, and you keep quiet. You don't call out those problems or speak out to find a solution to the challenges. Then you shouldn't call yourself an IP lawyer. Recently, just a little digression as I round up. I wrote an article. I wrote something. I wrote something on internet data and how Nigeria's internet data practices actually rob Nigerians. How our data practices rob consumers. And I was asking myself for the longest time. I've said to myself that how is it possible that we would say that we have people who call themselves ICT lawyers specializing in telecoms. We have data protection and privacy lawyers. We have consumer protection lawyers, and nobody is saying anything. We're all pretending as though none of these problems exist, and these problems are killing the industry. So for me, it's time. It is time for people to speak up, and we have to speak up. Otherwise, there won't be food for anybody. There will not be any jobs. We would all come together to discuss the potentials of an industry that, has been strangulated or that has been abused and cannot live up to its full potential. So once again, thank you very much for having me. I'm sure I must have gone in a different direction from what you would have thought, but I think it is important. You guys, I have seen the presentations. I've gone through them. You guys have done a very good job in highlighting, and we'll go into that, I'm sure, in your presentations, of highlighting the nature of the sports business. And you have done a very good job in x-raying what the foundations and the structures upon which a sports industry is built. But beyond that, at least let some of us take the heat up. I just want to speak to what needs to be done. It's not just about identifying. For me, we shouldn't just identify the structures that exist in in an academic manner, but we have to interrogate the issues. Why are these things not working in Nigeria? And what can we do? But it's not just about, pointing fingers or laying blame, but it's about what can we do as individuals, as business. And I'm speaking to Nigeria. I know we have mentees from across Africa, but it's the same thing. I was looking at an article today. Someone sent me an article. There's a copyright body in Kenya, and they're having some of the same issues that some of our copyright bodies here in Nigeria are having. And everyone is quiet. And because these bodies are fighting, creators cannot receive royalties. So practitioners must start to speak up and call out bad behavior, whether it is on the part of the regulators or other practitioners, or if there's need to, practitioners should take proactive steps towards fixing some of these problems. I would say that we have had the privilege of doing this. I mean, I have on a couple of occasions filed actions against bad behavior from both the trademark registry and the trademark patents and designs registry in the past. And you'd be surprised to learn that as I round up that there are many people. One of the things I discovered was that some people you'll meet opposition. There were some people constituted themselves into gatekeepers and decided that, okay, since this young man, who is this young lawyer, young boy, since I decided to speak up against or to take action, we filed a public interest lawsuit in 2011, because some people wanted to limit IP practice to a few firms in Nigeria. So we filed an action and at the Federal High Court. And the Federal High Court, pardon me, the Federal High Court gave judgment in our favor. We filed that action, we got judgment, and that plan was truncated. And some people said, oh, this guy, who is this guy? Who is, where is he from? Where are they from? So there will be opposition because some people want to be gatekeepers. And this is one of the biggest challenges you will find in Nigeria. So people will constitute themselves into gatekeepers to impede access to knowledge and access to information, to impede the public's access to knowledge and access to information. And it's the same thing. There were gatekeepers in IP, and of course, some of us fought to stop that. So I think that is one of the reasons why, I salute Jiipcc, because, this knowledge should not be the preserve of just a few, and all these, every time you guys come together, number one, you're building each other up. Number two, with these presentations, you're lending your voice to, as this is not a tiny drop, but imagine that we have several tiny drops of water. These drops will make a mighty ocean. So thank you very much for having me. Um, I look forward to hearing the presentations or listening to the presentations and having a fantastic time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Polarin, for that very wonderful thoughts, for those wonderful thoughts you shared in regards to the class today. So we'll be hearing Mr. Sands is not yet here on the call, right? So we don't know if we'll be having him later on. If he does join in, we'll be receiving him later on. But for the moment, what we'll be doing is that we'll be taking presentation. So I am aware that Group 3 might not be able to present in class today. So please, can we have Group 4 presentation? Can we have the presenter for Group 4 come up and try to make presentation? Please, you have 15 minutes for your presentation. Let's quickly have your presentation. Thank you. Hello, please, if you can hear me, we would like to take presentation from Group 4. Can we have the presenter for Group 4 in class? Do we have presenters from Group 4? The presenter or the backup presenter for Group 4, please, we would like to take your presentation now. Please, let's not waste time. Let's try to do that quickly. If you need assistance with sharing your slides, I can help do that from my end. But let's try to address that as soon as possible. okay, if the presenter or the backup presenters are not in class, can we have someone else? Can we have someone else just within the group step in and try to make presentation on behalf of the group? We want to take presentation, so please, let's have someone step in to make presentation. So we don't have any member from group 4 or group 3 in class that can present on behalf of the group. Please, we don't want to go without taking our presentations. Let's try and cooperate, members of both groups, right? We were given time to prepare for the presentation. Let's try to do that as soon as possible. We do not want to go without taking your presentation. Let's have presentations. If we have anyone for group 3 who can still make presentation, we can also take your presentation soon. Okay, this is quite disappointing, if I would say. So we do not have anyone present in both groups who can make presentation on behalf of the team. Okay, seeing that we may not be able to have presentations today because it seems our group members or our teams are not ready for their presentation in class today. We'd like to apologize to Mr. Polarin for that. So we do not know if you still have thoughts that you would still like to share. We'll try and work on getting this resolved, right? So we don't know if you still have any thoughts you would like to share in regards to the topic, and then we can maybe just move to questions, and then we can maybe just call it a day in class.
Okay, I'm wondering why is it the session that that I had the opportunity to attend that no one has prepared presentations for. They will collect small cane on a lighter note. Okay, so I would just quickly say that I think I spoke from a perspective of a let's say advocacy and reform. Actually, that was the perspective that I spoke from that I opened up from. I have had the opportunity of working in advocacy and in reform, in fact, criminal justice, law enforcement, and sports reform, intellectual property sports reform, and also as well, by the grace of God, as a former chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association Abuja branch and a NEC member of the NBA, I have also held some positions in those areas. I would say that I did go through the presentations of I think group 4. I'm surprised that there's no one here to present, and I was looking forward to hearing how they would tackle some of the points where they raise issues around AI, IP, anti-competition, antitrust, and competition in sports. But I would think I would just add that, you know, in terms of the opportunities, there are several opportunities that exist within the sports industry, within sports in Nigeria. There are many opportunities for investment, and there are many opportunities for career development, career expansion, and I think we live in a climate where our laws have not been developed to the point where they would serve as a barrier to entry, even though we do have some laws that are barriers to entry. But I think the law generally follows or tries to play catch up with industry, and it is when industry has to make some moves for the law to see the opportunity and then try to catch up. I think there is a huge question around the appreciation of value, the value of sports. I had a brief thought earlier. The sports for a long time, or in the history of sports has not always been an activity that has drawn much attention from the media. That from the little research, or from the research I have done, the relationship between sports and the media and business is less than 150 years old. It's just about 100 plus. It's less than 100 years old, in fact. About 100, yeah, less than 100 years old. But it is the reality that it is the reality of our times. And this cuts across all manner of sports. I was talking to a martial artist who mentioned to me that, is it Kamaru Usman? Who mentioned that Kamaru Usman is Nigerian, by the way. Just quickly, by show of hands, I would like to know how many of us know who Kamaru Usman is. Just pop an emoji up, or you can respond by emojis. Okay, Aisha knows who Kamaru Usman. Who else? Okay. I'll say Aisha represents everyone. Okay, yes, great. So Kamaru is doing some work. He's investing in Nigeria. Kamaru is Nigerian, and I think he's setting up an academy or a training school in Nigeria. And you have if you were to look at whether it's mixed martial arts or any of the other forms of martial arts, you will find that there's a huge market here in Nigeria for sports. So, I mean, by partnering with the University of Lagos to set up an MMA facility here, that on its own creates an ecosystem, of value that has its own value chain, laid out. I know a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, around COVID, I had conversations with these guys, Dambe Warriors. Dambe Warriors, two young guys who came together. Dambe how many of us know, does anyone know Dambe here? If you know Dambe, what's that?
Yes,
You know
I do. I do know that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dambe is an old, is a martial arts from northern Nigeria. It's very old. So I know these young guys, these guys resigned from. One of them the was was the head of Africa for Jumia. Held a very top position, a management position in Jumia, and he resigned from that position to start a league, Dambe Warriors. And if you watch, they've done fantastic stuff. But somehow there isn't. I mean, I won't call them fringe because they draw massive crowds. In different parts of northern Nigeria. So there is value. There's a lot of value. There's a massive value chain in sports that Nigeria can benefit from, and the business side is equally as important as the sporting side as well. So I think with that, having said that, I think one of the challenges really centers around the question of value and valuation. And funny enough, I am currently, today I held a session at the IP Institute's Intellectual Property Valuation Certification. There's this huge question. One of the problems that we have in Nigeria is that we don't understand, most of us, including professionals, don't understand the principles by which an objective determination of value can be arrived at. And so a lot of people, including professionals, only have this very subjective idea of what value is. And because it's subjective, you have situations where people walk into transactions blind. So a record label signs an artist with no appreciation of the value of that artist's work, no appreciation for any projection, any rational manner or objective manner of projecting how much revenue that artist can bring. So the label does not have that. The artist on their own side has no means to value or understand the nature of what they are bringing to the table as well. And that's the recipe for disaster, because there will definitely be somebody who, both parties might end up holding the short end of the stick, because there will be unmet expectations on both sides. So I think all these things come together, to affect or to reduce the impact of the potential that we are capable of. So having said that, I will yield the floor back to you, and perhaps take any questions that may arise to the best of my ability. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Polarin. So I got reached out to by one of the members of Group 4, and I was notified that they will be able to present in class. So please, Tando, if I'm not mistaken, Millicent, please, you can go ahead and start.
Hi, sir. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you. My name is Tando Mehlape. I'm from South Africa, and I'll be presenting on behalf of Group 2 on Group 4 on the presentation that we worked on together: sports, business, intellectual property, and law. So, all right, I can now start, right, sir?
Yes, please, you can go ahead.
All right. The intersection between sports, business, intellectual property, and law is rich and complex because modern sports are not only about athletic performance, they're also major industries powered by legal and commercial frameworks. When we break them down, we'll break them down. We have sports and business, sports and intellectual property, we have sports and law, and how they all intersect is like they all come alive in situations like broadcasting rights deals, sports merchandising, sponsorship and endorsements, technological innovations, disputes, and litigation. So in conclusion from that, sports provides the platform, business drives monetization, intellectual property secures creativity and branding, and law ensures fairness, protection, and enforceability. Moving forward to understanding the legal implications of technology, balancing innovation with law, accountability, and ethics in a digital world. Legal implications of technology. Every new technology, whether it's in sports, it's in business, or in daily life, it creates legal challenges. We have data protection and we have data protection and privacy. We have intellectual property as it is. We have liability. We have contracts and licensing. Also, balancing innovation with law. There's encouraging of growth. There's the regulatory sandboxes. We also have sports examples of some sorts. When it comes to accountability, accountability in a digital world. We have transparency, responsibility for harm, corporate governance. Moving forward, we also have ethics in digital age. Beyond law, ethics fills the gap where regulations are not yet clear. We have fair use of data, AI bias, and integrity in sports. In essence, law provides the rules, innovation drives progress, accountability ensures someone takes responsibility when things go wrong, and ethics, it keeps human values at the center in a fast-changing digital world. Moving forward to the next slide, we have antitrust and competition law in sports. So in this instance, antitrust and competition law, it plays a big role in sports because sports is a unique business. Sports is a unique business, right? They depend on corporations, like teams need to play each other, but also it's also a competition wherein teams must compete fairly on and off the field. When we break it down, what is antitrust? Antitrust and competition law, its purpose is to prevent unfair monopolies, price fixing, collusion, or restrictive practices that harm consumers and markets. And why is sports special? In sports, we have interdependence, wherein teams must collaborate, which sometimes looks anti-competitive, and also we have collective agreements, wherein there's salary caps, we have drafts or exclusive broadcasting deals that might restrict individual freedom, but are often justified to maintain balance, fairness, and sustainability in sport. The key legal issues in sports, there's broadcasting and media rights, we have sponsorship and merchandising, we have player transfers and labor markets, league structures and breakaway competitions, ticketing and platforms, and digital platforms. When we move forward, we have an example here wherein there was a case, EU versus Super League. It was a 2023 ruling. The European Court of Justice ruled that the UEFA or FIFA rules banning rival leagues were abusive of their dominant market positions. So I'm going to explain why it matters. It matters because it protects fans from overpriced tickets, limited access, and poor competition. It protects athletes from unfair labor restrictions. It promotes fair markets for sponsors, broadcasters, and sports businesses. And also it maintains the integrity of sport while balancing the need for cooperation. So antitrust and competition law in sports make sure that while teams and leagues work together to organize competitions, they do not abuse power, they do not block rivals or exploit players and fans. It's about balancing collaboration with fair competition. Moving forward to regulatory compliance and governance in sports, Nigeria, and in Nigerian sports. Okay. So regulatory compliance means that sports organizations, clubs, athletes, and officials follow the rules, laws, and standards set by governing bodies, governments, and regulators. We have legal compliance, we have sports-specific rules, and we also have contractual compliance. And also governance in sports. Governance is about how sports organizations are managed and controlled. It includes structures, decision-making processes, accountability systems, and ethics, wherein there's transparency, there's accountability, there's integrity, inclusivity, and diversity. We also have an example here wherein there was a FIFA's reform after the 2015 corruption scandal, which focused on improving governance and transparency. So, okay. The areas of regulatory compliance and governance in sport, we have, okay. The areas of regulatory compliance and governance in sports, we have anti-doping regulations, we have financial fair play and integrity, we have health, excuse me, we have health and safety regulations, we have broadcasting and sponsorship regulations, we have match fixing and betting integrity, and also child protection and safeguarding. So it matters because it protects athletes, it protects fans, it protects investors and sponsors, and also it protects the sport itself. Like strong governance prevents corruption, financial collapse, and scandals of some sort. So in summary, regulatory compliance is about following the rules. And then governance is about creating structures and cultures that ensure transparency, accountability, and integrity in sport. Together, they keep sport fair, safe, credible, and sustainable. Then I'm going to move forward again here to sports disputes and resolutions. So, okay, sports generates disputes just like any other industry, but because they're global and fast moving, they often require specialized resolution mechanisms instead of regular courts. For example, we have the global mechanisms for sports dispute resolutions. So in this instance, why is specialized sports dispute resolution, why does it exist? It exists because of speed, expertise, and global nature. The key global mechanisms, we have Court of Arbitration for Sports, we have international federations' internal mechanisms, we have national disputes resolution chambers, we have mediation and alternative disputes resolutions, we have we also have ordinary courts. And then the types of sports disputes handled globally are doping and discipline, which is by WADA, WADA and CAS. We have player contracts and transfers. We have sponsorship and broadcasting. We have governance and elections. We also have event hosting disputes. So global disputes resolution, it matters because it produces consistency. It gives us, it also has trust, like athletes and fans believe in fair outcomes, right? So it also produces efficiency and enforceability. So in summary, global sports dispute resolution relies mainly on specialized arbitration, federation tribunals, and mediation, or ADR, with national courts as a last resort. These mechanisms ensure that disputes in sports are settled fairly, quickly, and consistently across borders. And then, okay, moving forward. Apologies if I'm moving fast, then I'm looking at the time. Moving forward, we're going to move to the career opportunities at the intersection of sports and of sports, businesses, IP, and law. So here, since the intersection of sports, business, IP, and law is a booming field, it blends passion for sports with expertise in regulation, contracts, innovation, and commerce. So different career opportunities are as follows. We have sports law and legal practices, wherein we can have a sport lawyer, we can have an arbitrator or a mediator, we can have a compliance officer. Also, we can also have a legal counsel for federations or leagues. Under intellectual property and brand protection, we have IP lawyer or consultant. We have a brand protection specialist. We have an image rights manager. We also have a sports tech IP specialist. In business and commercial roles in sports, there's a sports agent or a manager. We have a sponsorship or a licensing manager. We have a broadcasting and media rights specialist. We have an event management executive. In governance and policy, we have a sports governance advisor. We have a policy analyst in sports and IP. And we also have anti-doping or an integrity officer. In tech and innovation careers, there we can have sports data or an IP compliance officer. We can have an esports legal counsel. We can have an AI and sports regulation specialist. So in summary, the career paths are open in legal practice, in IP and branding, business and commercial roles, governance and policy. We also have some in academia and research, and also sports tech innovation. And I've come to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Ando, for presenting. We really appreciate the efforts, and also being able to present a 40 minutes, and also being able to present a 40 slides, 40 something plus slides presentation in under 10-15 minutes. So well done to you, right, for taking the initiative to do that. We really do appreciate, and well done to your team members that contributed in also making the presentation available. So we'll be going back to Mr. Polarin. We've been able to have presentation from one of the groups. So sir, we don't know if you have any thoughts in regards to this before we just go and take questions. Mr. Polarin, are you still with us, sir?
I think we can go to questions. They did a lot of, there was a lot of work, and that's why I said I was looking forward to see how the presentation would come together, because you can't, in fact, it's quite a feat to talk about intersection between sports, business, and intellectual property in such a short time, to do that in just one presentation. So I think, I mean, that's quite commendable. As I said, there's so much, you talk about, there's governance, there's health and safety, there is, of course, the business part, and even within business, now the people are talking about business, human rights, and human rights in business, in the sports industry. There's dispute resolution, uh, governance. There's so much. It's really, really wide. So I would say well done. It would be. I would have loved. I think there's no end to academic and theoretic knowledge. It would be nice for the presentations to perhaps maybe highlight some of the challenges within the areas of interest or areas of observation, and perhaps maybe pick one or two and suggest some, suggest solutions or attempts to prefer solutions on how to fix some of these problems. But all in all, this was a very good presentation. You covered the field. Of course, what that means is because it's a very wide presentation, you might not be able to go, into the nitty-gritty of, you might not be able to go into the weeds or into the details. But well done. And thank you also once again for the opportunity.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Polarin. So I don't know if if we'll be able to take questions now. Can we take questions, please? Do we have questions that we would like to ask based off of the topic? Sports business and law, quite a broad topic. If we can, we would like to take questions now. Do we have questions that we'd like to ask in regards to today's class? I'm sure we have people who are sports fans that are also maybe wondering about the business side to sports and the correlation also with law, and you may have particular questions you would like to ask. Please, you can go ahead and ask questions if you do have questions.
I should also mention that in terms of my interest in sports, and in fact, so this topic is a very interesting one because not only do I have a few clients who, are in this, either athletes or who represent athletes, so both talent and talent management. And then I myself have also put money in sports, and I'm not talking about sports betting. But I have invested, that was a joke, but I have invested money in a sporting venture in the past, and made some money out of that. So, I mean, this is, for me, this should be, it's a very practical conversation, for me. And I think some of us too should think of, that's why I like these conversations. It would help if, in addition to learning, we're actually able to earn. So there can be some learning and earning going on, at the same time. I've also been nominated to serve on the board of the sports federation as well. So I just thought to mention that. So if just to stimulate, ideas for questions or, commentary. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. So I think I have a question for my own. Okay. I can see one question. So before I ask my question, I'll be reading out the questions from a few questions from Azizat. So she said the question is not relating to sports and intellectual property. My question is in regards to our assignments research work. I know copyright is still remains with us, but can we still, if the organization or institutions uses the research for other purposes? Okay, please, Azizat, I don't really get your question. Please, can you unmute and ask your question?
I think the question has to do with who owns copyrights in arising from a research institution, or copyright that is the product of Azizat, are you speaking about Jiipcc? I'm sure she's not speaking about Jiipcc.
Good evening, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so my question is not really in regards to Jiipcc. It is like general question regarding our group assignment or anything, probably internship like this too. We are like asked to submit research works for our assignment. So to assess whether or not we are getting what the facilitator or mentors are talking about. So in regards to that, the general purpose of that is to post on their platform or any other place that okay, these are what our students or our mentees have done. So if they use the research work for any other purpose rather than posting on their platform, or probably I came across my work on another platform that I did not consent to, can I sue for that kind of thing?
Azizat, you don't want you don't want peace. I didn't say that, but that's an interesting. It's an interesting. That was the first thought I had as to whether you were referring to this context. So the first question that came to my mind was when you said another use other than research, and I thought to myself, such as, could you give an example? And the example of finding your work on another platform is a little incomplete. But what I would say is that if we were to go, let's go academic now, or let's go legal, not academic, let's go legal. Your question is, who is the author, who is the owner, first owner of copyrights in any work? What I would say is, my answer to that question is, under the Copyright Act, the owner or owners, the first owners, are the people who create the work, people that the work originates from. But the Copyright Act is a special kind of law. It's not just like a regular law. It's a law that contains what you call enabling provisions. What that means is that the law envisages a situation where, now let me go back a little. Copyright and in fact, intellectual property exists within the realm of what you call private law. It's not a part of public law, it's part of private law. And you ask me, how do I know? The answer is the property, intellectual property. So when you own property is private, it belongs to you. So intellectual property, just like any other type of property, like tangible property, or other forms of intangible property, exists within the realm of private law. And the approach of government, or the approach of the law, is that private law should be left to and enforced by private individuals. Yeah, I took a few steps back to answer your question. So this is the foundation. So private law should be left to private individuals to enforce. And so that is why if I take Azizat's phone, though it can also be criminal, but the compensation for taking Azizat's phone will be that Azizat can sue the person that took her phone and get her damages. The compensation for stealing Azizat's intellectual property or her song is that Azizat can sue the person that took the song and recover, damages. So, because it is within the realm of private law, government really has no business intervening and interfering and even getting involved to a large extent beyond public policy. And this is why when people government is not helping people to protect their intellectual property. No, it's not government's work to protect your intellectual property. It's like saying government is not helping me to protect my land. It's your duty, your responsibility to register your title, to build a fence and put a gate on your property, and to take charge and take possession of your property. It's your responsibility, not government. So intellectual property is within the domain of private law. Now, taking that a step further, what you find with most laws, like the Copyright Act, is that because government is not supposed to intervene, what the law does is that it creates enabling provisions. So there's a presumption that the parties should determine what happens between them. But there are situations where the parties may not have come to an agreement or may not have discussed. For example, the parties may not have said, okay, let's sit down and discuss who will own the copyright, or who will first own this, or who will own that. And so what the Act does is that it provides for cases where the parties have not contracted on certain things. So with regards to first ownership of copyright, the first ownership belongs to the author, but there are exceptions to that rule. And there are quite a number of exceptions where you have joint creators. The copyright belongs to all the joint creators equally, or to the extent of the value of their creation, of their input rather. And now in the former Copyright Act, you would need, with regards to employers and employees, the employer would have to have put a clause in the employment agreement to own the copyright. Now that situation has been reversed. So your question as to who owns the copyright at the first instance. So if I take your question, to, like I said, on a jurisprudential level, I would say that the copyright, because that's the question. The copyright will vest first, in the absence of any discussion, will first vest in the people that created it. But then the next question will now be, is there any contractual agreement or arrangement between, let's use Jiipcc now, between Jiipcc and the interns, under which that general rule has changed? And that is where the point of intersection for me lies. So the first question will be, what are the terms under which, your internship, what are the terms under which you took this internship? Number one. And then number two, based on those terms, what rights does Jiipcc have when Jiipcc says, take this assignment, go and bring it, turn it in, and so on and so forth? So those are the questions that one should ask. If there are any gaps, I would of course advise, the lawyer and me would say, Jiipcc should plug those gaps. But assuming that there was no agreement, or there are no provisions in the terms, or the terms and conditions, or the guidelines informing the mentorship program, then I would say that what should ordinarily happen is that Jiipcc should request for permission to use the research work, and the permission will be granted by everyone, either expressly or impliedly. I would take this a step further to say that the information, the exceptions to copyright protection now include fair dealing in Nigeria, and fair dealing is not as broad as fair use. I think fair use is a much narrower standard than fair dealing. Sorry. But what I would say is, because your question now asks, what's that? You ask, can we sue if the institution uses the research for any other purpose. And in the absence of any agreement to the contrary, I would assume, let's say Jiipcc decided to put all your presentations in a compendium and to publish that compendium. Of course, ordinarily, I would say that Jiipcc, in the absence of any agreement to the contrary, would probably require your consent, to do that. In the absence of any express agreement to the contrary. But of course, I'm sure you will not sue Jiipcc. And I want to believe that there is an implied, there's an implied release that is granted. But I'm sure if there isn't, that will be looked into. And somebody asked how football stars and their logos used for making bags or promoting brands at football. Yeah, so everything really comes down to who owns what. That speaks to merchandising. A lot of that from the who gets what part. It is the owner of the trademark that gets the everything. So what should ordinarily happen is that football teams are run by owners. Aziza still has a follow-up question. Okay, football teams are run by owners. Or football teams are run by, they're owned by either individuals or, companies or institutions. And ordinarily speaking, the person who owns the football team should also ensure that they own all the intellectual property surrounding the team. That includes the team's logo, the team's branding, and all of that. It is different from the players' image, or the players themselves and their names. So with regards to the players' names and likeness and images, that is, of course, that belongs to them. Unless, it's rare, you would rarely find a situation where a player would I'm not sure how much one will pay a player to get them to license their likeness to the team. But in situations where the player does that, then the team would own the player's likeness for the period of of whatever license. The team would definitely have had to pay for that. With regards to compensation, using Nigerian law, I would say that there are some. Everything will depend on the nature of what is in question. So if you're talking about brands, the Trademarks Act is what regulates the rights that brand owners have. And the Trademarks Act is not as the Trademarks Act is not as it's not as equitable as the Copyright Act is. The Copyright Act is more equitable because the Copyright Act creates moral rights that the authors are able to enjoy. And in some cases, these moral rights extend, they are inalienable, and they sometimes extend beyond the sale of the work. So a painter can sell a painting, and even after selling the painting, still has the right to enjoy from the proceeds of a subsequent sale. So I would say that this question is a little would depend on the nature of the rights involved. Someone asked, under Nigerian law, athletes considered employees or independent contractors when signing with clubs. Athletes, I'm guessing that who asked that question? Bukola, are you speaking to footballers or other types of athletes? Is that Bukola? Could you clarify quickly?
Bukola, are you with us?
Okay, let me just give a. So ordinarily speaking, well, the determination depends on the jurisdiction. So your question as to, I'm guessing this will be footballers now. In most cases, most footballers are in Nigeria. Footballers are hired as employees, so they are legally treated as employees and not as independent contractors. In the same way that actors are also treated as employees, of the producer or the executive producer, rather, or whoever is responsible for putting the movie together. So the footballers are considered employees in Nigeria, and the club exerts a high degree of control over the players. In fact, the players actually sign employment contracts with clubs in Nigeria. And I think this is very consistent with, I think there are some cases at the National Industrial Court. The courts have ruled that, athletes, well, footballers and professional athletes are employees. Okay. Someone as are content creators meant to have total rights to the content they make for brands, or the brands are to claim the rights and ownership even though it's made by a content creator? I think everything really centers, like I said, IP really is a private law issue. And the law presumes that the parties would have negotiated on all the major aspects of that transaction or that contract. But where they have not, then the law creates some default provisions that apply, in default of an agreement by the parties. So when it comes to work by commissioned work, what tends to happen is that if we're talking about content now, because content does not, content has its own special meaning these days. I would say that the first rule is that everything comes down to the agreement between the content creator and the brand. But ordinarily speaking, and we touched on this in the IP valuation class today, because the value, the amount that a creator, an IP owner can charge, or the economic, so the argument is that, or the perspective is that the economic, intellectual property it has a dual nature. It has a legal nature and an economic nature. So it has a legal life and an economic life. In many cases, the economic life outlives the legal life. So almost all types of intellectual property rights expire, with the exception of trademarks. Copyright has an expiration date depending on the work. Patents expire, designs expire. Now, having said that, a number of factors determine the economic viability or the economic value of an intellectual property asset. What do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. A patent may be worth $10 million. If we were to take that same patent, patent that was sold for $10 million, if you were to sell that same patent patents are valid for 20 years, in its 19th year, it will be worth more in its 19th year than it was in year 1, simply because the extent of legal protection has almost lapsed. Do you understand? So there are several factors that affect the value of intellectual property, of an intellectual property asset. And one of those factors would also is the extent of the right that is granted. So if a creator is commissioned to do something and the person says, look, even though you're going to pay me to do this work, but I will own the intellectual property in the work, then it will affect the price that that person will be paid. Does that make sense? In the same way too, if the brand is saying, look, you're going to create this work for us, but we want to own it, then we want to own it outright, then the creator can then say, if you're going to own it outright, then this is how much you're going to pay, and then that person can charge a greater fee. In the same way that if you take a photograph with a photographer and you ask and you tell them, look, I want some of them will tell you, if you want a high resolution, pay X amount. If you want a lower resolution, pay X amount. If you pay a small amount, we'll give you a copy with a watermark. If you want a copy without a watermark, you pay a little more. Does that make sense? So I think the brands do have a right to demand for ownership or authorship, but it would then be subject to the agreement of the parties. But even when and this is one of the areas where IP intersects with privacy rights. Even if the creator says, oh, I'm going to retain ownership of this work, insofar as the brand is mentioned, or the brand's brand, or the brand's trademark, or the brand's IP is used in that work, the brand can actually stop the creator from using its trademark or its brand, wrongly. So I think it's a very nuanced. That's a very good question. It's a very nuanced question. And yes, I agree that brands should be able to request for full ownership, but they should be ready to also pay the price of full ownership as well. Somebody asked, what are the mistakes people make in the sports industry, especially when it comes to contract negotiations between players? And I mean, you're talking about football. I don't know, when people say sports, they think football. But there are so many other sports, as we all know. Which is why I talked about Dambe and Kamaru Usman. I watch MMA, by the way. So as a lawyer, what are the basic advice you give to players whenever they are being signed into play? Because you've heard of clubs. Yeah, I would say the first thing is always have a lawyer. You should have a lawyer, and or seek legal counsel at all costs. I would say that I'm the founder of the Intellectual Property Lawyers Association Nigeria, IPLAN, by the grace of God. And IPLAN has a clinic that provides pro bono legal support to creators. I think Jiipcc also has a clinic as well. So I don't think any talent in Nigeria really that has access to the internet has any excuse, for signing a bad deal or a bad contract. I don't expect that. I'm one of those people who believe that creators should be allowed to create. I had a conversation with an artist, a fine artist. She's very popular, very big, across the world. She's Nigerian. And we were talking, and the person said she was going to a school to study business administration. And I said, why? She said, because I want to manage myself. And I told the person that that's a huge problem. It's a red flag. Because as an artist, you should take the room and have the time to express yourself. if you're an artist that is handling management, you cannot do the two of them very well. One will suffer for the other. And oftentimes it is the art that suffers. And of course, in some cases, like when you think of people like Michael Jackson, think of people like the artist formerly known as Prince, the late Michael Jackson. There are a handful of artists who are able to hold their own in terms of business, the business side or negotiations. But the vast majority, history is full of stories of artists who are cheated. And it's because, the artists, the inspiration for the artist is not necessarily money, but the business person's inspiration is money, to a large extent. So I would say that one of the biggest mistakes that people make is not, and I can speak to this coming from so many angles. One of the biggest mistakes is not consulting a lawyer. And then also very close to that is consulting a lawyer that is not an IP lawyer or a sports lawyer, consulting a lawyer outside the area of expertise. That's a huge mistake. It would be like going to somebody having malaria and the person now goes to a vet doctor, that specializes in cows. That could be quite fatal. So I would say that, the biggest problem, get somebody to negotiate on your behalf. There is at the moment, there's a project I'm working on, and with someone, we're setting up a structure for someone. And, I was telling the person that the first step should be, the first person you should get on your team is a lawyer. And that is what I do in practice. So you hire a lawyer, and then you get that lawyer to then hire other members of your team. You and the lawyer will work together, do an agreement. So I'm speaking out about artists now. You and that lawyer work together, do an agreement containing the terms and conditions for your manager. And you and the lawyer hire the manager. Then you look at finance, and then you look at other roles. But the first step is to get a lawyer. In the same way too, with regards to players, the club's lawyer represents the club and not the players. So the club lawyer may not be the best source of legal advice, the best, source for legal advice. So I would say, get a lawyer, and if you cannot afford one, you can get a lawyer pro bono. It's not for free and it's not cheap, but you can get a lawyer pro bono at the IPLAN Clinic, the Intellectual Property Lawyers Association Nigeria, or I know Jiipcc has a clinic, at the Jiipcc Clinic too. So I would say that history is filled, the history books are filled with players who have been exploited, especially in Nigeria, by clubs who sign them without, it's not just without proper contracts, it's that the contracts are almost entirely one-sided. And talking about one-sided contracts, I would encourage everyone to read. I have an article that addresses, it's called the Contract of Adhesion, ADHESION. I guess if you, it's still on the conversation of internet data practices. If you Google, I think you can find it on LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn, how Nigeria's internet data practices rob consumers, something like that. But you find that there is such a thing as the one-sided contracts. And it happens a lot in sports. Although in football, I think the NFA, or the NFF, that's what they call themselves now. The NFF does have all manner of rules that are aimed at addressing or curbing player abuse. But it's a totally different issue entirely when you dig deep into the details. So I would say the biggest challenge is because lawyers also are trained, we are trained to negotiate. So you should have a lawyer negotiating. Negotiation is a very big deal because you want somebody who can get the best possible deal for you and ensure that the terms of the contract reflect the deal that you got. Yeah. So I hope I answered that question. I think are we together?
Yes, sir. Thank you
Okay.
very much, sir, for helping us run through those questions. We really do appreciate. So I'll just be taking my question real quick, and then we can call it a day. Mr. Polarin has helped us run through quite a number of questions, and we say a very big thank you, sir. So my question is, for companies that provide sponsorships for clubs, for players in different sports today, do they have other means by which they make money aside from merchandising of their products through those players or through those athletes?
Can you take that question again? I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. So my question is, are there other means, companies that sponsor, let's say clubs and players and maybe other athletes, right? Are there other means they make money aside from merchandising, right? Maybe the sales of their products or their wares or their kits. Are there other ways through their sponsorship partnership with players and clubs that they make money aside from that avenue?
Okay, brilliant. So I would have said well, on the lighter note, I would say they make money spiritually, but that's just a joke. So I think that's an interesting question. Now, with regards to merchandising, actually, it is the club that makes money from merchandise and not the company. In my second intervention, I had mentioned that the relationship between sports and the media is a fairly recent one. It's less than 100 years old, which means that football, for example, has not always drawn the wide attention of the press, and as it does today. And when something draws the attention of the press, what happens is that businesses, brands, and people who are also looking for attention try to align themselves with the thing that is getting attention. So the value for a company that is sponsoring a club, the value for that company is in the visibility that it gets, from the outing with that club. So when the club wears their jersey, for example, and they go out to the field, and the name of the company is right there on the jersey, that is free advertisement. And if the club is able to win, it's more free advertisement you get. So what a sponsor gets, the sponsor doesn't and ordinarily should not be sharing from the sale of merchandise unless you're talking of a different kind of sponsor now. And there are those merchandise deals that clothing companies will enter into. So Nike, for example, can decide to partner with Aimba, and in that case, of course, that is not it's not a sponsorship per se, in the sense that, in the way that, let's say, Guinness might decide to sponsor, any other brand might decide to sponsor, or Indomie might decide to sponsor Aimba. Do you understand? So I think the value to sponsors is from the visibility. And you find that the clubs now have a responsibility to look for ways to ensure that their sponsors get the needed visibility. I had mentioned that I had this brief where someone was trying to get sponsors to put money together for an Olympian, and unfortunately, this type of tragedy can only happen, we can only talk about it here in Nigeria, really, because it is a tragedy. But left to me, I will say that the Olympian in other places would not even need, you won't even need to shout too much. There'll be a ton of businesses, right there waiting to jump on the bandwagon. I put the blame of this on the side of regulators, but I'll also put part of the blame also on the side of the professionals as well, because the interest, money will flow in the direction of attention and interest. Money always flows in the direction of attention and interest. Did I see Mofi? Is Mofi in this call? Is Mofi in this call? Okay, no, she's not. Okay, so money flows in the direction of attention and interest. So if you look at athletes or talents who are able to attract the most attention to themselves, you find that they are the ones who get, they are the ones who are able to attract sponsors. I'm not saying that football players should now engage in antics, but a lot of the time, all those celebratory dances and the celebratory runs and the various haircuts, all those things, they're all gimmicks that are targeted at catching the eye of the press and winning the attention of fans. So I think the value that a brand gets is derived from the attention, the amount of attention it gets. I'll wrap up this session by, let me see. I noticed some years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, that there's this brand. It's an African brand. They are based in South Africa, but they operate in Nigeria. I don't want to mention any names, but I'm sure we will know the brand. That brand, they do this program like once a year. They did one this year. When they do that program, there's usually a headline sponsor. I noticed that after the first, second, third, the first and second, and then the third program, I noticed that the headline sponsors you would have a company that would come as headline sponsor, and in under a year, that company would have disappeared. They would have gone under. There was one, it was Payport. There was another one, it was and next thing, in 1 year, the headline sponsor has gone bankrupt or has had to shut down. That's not a good tally. So the objective of any advertiser or any sponsor is to get the most eyeballs from the public. And it's not necessarily, I hope I didn't misunderstand your question. So the sponsor's interest is not in revenue from merchandise, even though they can also do endorsement deals and brand products. But the sponsor's interest is actually lies in the attention they are able to garner and get from their sponsorship of the athlete.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for helping us run through all our questions in today's class. We really, really do appreciate. I want to say a big thank you to also the team that has stayed back so far to ensure that we finish up with class. Well done once again to Tando for helping us run through presentation in class today. And for those who ask questions, well done to you also. So for just to more like an announcement, right? So next week we'll be having, for intellectual property as a whole, we'll be having one more class, right, to go. We've come all the way from week 1 talking about different subject matters as tied to intellectual property, and we have 1 week to go in intellectual property as a whole. We'll be addressing other things as the week comes by, as the program rounds up. But for intellectual property, we have one more class to go. So please, I want to encourage us, because I notice our number is dwindling quite a bit. So I want to encourage us to just ensure that we are in class next week, to also make sure that we pay attention to the tasks that are given, and we are able to fill in for the roles that we are assigned to. Right. So please, if you have been assigned a role to perform, or an activity to do, please try your possible best to meet up with it. All right, so thank you once again, Mr. Polarin, for being here with us in today's class. We really, really do appreciate your presence. And with that, we've come to the end of week 4 on sports, business, and law. I hope, and we hope all together, that you've been able to learn a thing or two. So with that, good night, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.